over in Rotterdam Center. It was beautiful to walk around.
Oh, that's amazing.
We're live.
I see we're live. 41 people already here. Welcome, everyone. Lovely to see you joining us today. We will wait a few more minutes to make sure everyone can join us today. Maybe in the meantime, it would be lovely to know where you are joining us from today. So pop it in the chat. I see Elisa joining us from our Amsterdam office and Kritika joining us from our London office. Amazing. Oh, I see a lot of cities coming through. Madrid, lovely Spain, The Hague, Cumbria. We're all over, I see. Marianne joining us from the airport area. Amazing. Welcome, everyone. I see people from the UK, from the Netherlands, but also from Slovenia. We have Spain. Lovely to see such a diverse group of people from all over Europe. And I see Tibor is joining us from a moving train. Eric as well on the move. Amazing. We'll wait a few more minutes. Northern Ireland. Great.
I think between all of those areas, Lotte, that means that the average weather is low 20s, quite mild, maybe no rain, which is very different from the UK and Ireland right now.
Well, and then the Netherlands. It's been raining here all morning as well. I don't want to be outside at the moment. I'm happy to be inside joining this webinar at the moment.
We really want Spain to be bringing that average up for us.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure the Cumbria is helping. I don't know who joined from Cumbria, but I think they're probably cancelling out Spain.
Well, hopefully, we're all inside and dry at the moment to join this session. You see, we're already getting a big group, 65 people joining us. Welcome, everyone. If you haven't shared your location yet, please drop it into the chat. Would be amazing to learn where everyone is from. And we'll wait a few more minutes. I see Patrick is joining from Rotterdam. I'm a little biased on that because that's where I'm located right now as well. And Dave is mentioning 13 degrees and dry in Cumbria. So Chris, the average is still okay with the rain.
That's just awful to hear because I'm in Wigan about 30 miles down the road and it's not good. It's not good.
Welcome, everyone. I see people from the south of the Netherlands, from Brabant, joining us as well. Owen, Haarlem, Troy, Surrey, amazing. We have already a big group. I think we can start the webinar. Let me first introduce myself. My name is Lotte from Altura. I'm account manager here, and for the people that don't know Altura just yet, we sell software that help you do all your tenders. So it doesn't matter if they're public or private, and we have AI in the system built in to make the process a lot more efficient, insightful, and more structured throughout. Do you want to learn more about that? Let us know. We're happy to jump on a call with you. But today the subject is different. That's why we have Chris here with us today. Let me do a quick introduction of Chris, and then he can can take it over from there. Chris is very experienced head of bids and proposals. He has successfully headed teams both in the UK, national, global level, and he holds a professional certification, which is the highest level of accreditation, which is a very difficult word for me to pronounce, from the Association of Proposal Management Proposals. Not only that, he actually also has degrees from the University of Edinburgh, Chester, and OU, and he's currently studying a PhD at Chester, investigating how bid team members form, test, and either update or reject plans and strategies during the pursuit phase. So welcome, Chris. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone for taking the time to dial in and listen. Hopefully this should be interesting and maybe even teach you something through this. I was ready to do a small introduction, but Lottie's taken literally everything.
My apologies.
So for me, the main things to cover from my side, I've been a bid manager and head of bids. I've been a bid manager for around 15 years now, 2010, and head of bids for around 10 years of that, started in 2015. And alongside that, I've always studied and I've had a real interest in psychology, especially. And that's gone through a number of phases in that time, but my real core interest is in decision making. In organizational psychology. So I'm very interested in how people make decisions, especially under the pressure in the moment, compared to the big strategic ideas that they start with. I'm very interested in how people either stay on track with the strategy that they had planned, or how they sometimes abandon it in favor of the more immediate decisions instead. As Lottie mentioned, I'm currently writing my PhD with the University of Chester, and alongside the UK APMP chapter's academia arm as well. And we're very, very interested in trying to build bridges between formal research in bids and tenders, of which there is very little. It's a very, very understudied area on the global market. And we're very interested in building bridges or developing research formally in bids and tenders, and especially then relating it to the real world instances that we see. So what I'm hoping to talk you through today is a little bit of the research that we're currently carrying out at University of Chester, give you some of the background into it and let you know where it's up to, and especially to try and tie up how that fits with what you do every day as bid managers, and how it compares to some of the terms and some of the ideas that you already know as bid managers as well. So we're going to be concentrating in the first half of this session on the idea of theories. And we'll come through and we'll explain what a theory is in this context, and especially how it compares to some of the other ideas that we see every day as bid managers, especially like win teams. We'll look at those too. I'll talk you through the current research that's ongoing at University of Chester. And if we have time, we'll develop in the second half, we'll build on some of those ideas, and we'll look at a slightly more general framework for good decision making. And I'll talk you through what good decision making means in the research and how we can apply some of that to our everyday instances. This is Altura's webinar. It would be remiss of me not to mention technology as we go. And what I'll try and do especially is point out some of the areas where AI in this emerging landscape, some of the areas where AI can do some of the things we'll talk about, but actually a huge part of what we're going to look at today, AI is both not very capable of at the moment and will remain not very capable of, and we'll touch on why this remains outside of the scope of AI. But the interesting part of that is a lot of what we're going to look at today is the interesting stuff and the things that people tend to enjoy most about bid management. Whereas AI can free us up from slightly more mundane activities that actually stop us from getting to some of the things that we talk about in today's session. I mentioned one of our key goals is to try and build bridges between academia, between theory, between formal research, and what we normally see in everyday practice. And at the top line, theory should explain everyday practice, but as many people will know, there tends to be quite a distance in between theoretical ideas, and it's even what we see with things like the APMP body of knowledge. It's very easy to turn around and say, sure, that's easy in theory, but it never really works like that. My goal today is to try and give you something in between the two. So how are we going to do that? Let's start just by making sure everyone is on the same footing on this. Just a couple of very quick definitions. Theories are very small. They're very actionable. They involve very specific testable instances. We develop millions of theories every single day, not least of which will be one that if I cross the road at the wrong time and get hit by a car, it will be very unpleasant. Now, there's only one way to test a theory, and that's by putting it into practice. I don't recommend that you test the car theory. Just take that one as knowledge, okay? For one of the important things that we'll look at through this session with theories is how we test them, how we seek evidence and information around these theories, and especially how we update our beliefs accordingly. And we'll touch on that through the session. You saw in the title that the goal of this session is to move from theory to strategy. So let's just compare the two very quickly on this. A theory is very small, very testable, and you would have multiple theories testing your strategy, which is more a plan. Your strategy is how you get from A to B, and most importantly, whether you need to move through C, D, E, and F to be able to get there. So your strategy contains multiple elements. And when we test those elements to see if they're the correct way or if they're suitable, then those are the theories that we're testing along the way. So what we're going to look at today, as I've said, is we're going to spend about the first half of the session moving through the current research and how we develop, test, and integrate theories in everyday life. And then we're going to move that into a slightly more broad conversation about positive and strong decision making. And that's hopefully something that people can take at the theory level into their live bids, and at the decision level into either the very large bids or for people who are looking at running bidding environments. These are quite strong and tested frameworks for making strong decisions. So what do we mean by a theory? I'd like to start with a short TED talk that displays this quite well. And it's not a description of theories that many of you will have covered coming into this session. But at least, Krithika, if we can just come off presenter view for a second, I'm going to change the slide. I'd like to show everyone a 2-minute TED view that's going to talk to you about babies and how we start to develop theories based on our initial understanding of the world. So let me just get the right window. Not that one,
and please, like my colleague Elisa mentioned already in the chat, share your questions, any insights you have from personal experience in the chat. Or either bring them up during the session to make it as interactive as possible, or we answer your questions right away as well.
Thanks, Elise. We're on the right screen now, so let's let this video run for about 2 minutes. I'll pause it when we're done.
Social world, then they too must make inferences from limited data. Do they? A few years ago, we set out to answer this question in another study where we measured babies' looking behaviors. In this study, we presented babies with a group of puppets, each of which appeared to want an interesting toy. The puppets didn't like to share, however. Here's a video of a baby watching this puppet show with the interactions between the puppets that, as I said, don't like to share. It may not be Oscar worthy, but it's very entertaining to babies. So all of the babies in this study watched this initial scenario with the two relevant exchanges. In the first exchange, the bear dominated the elephant. In the second exchange, the hippo dominated the bear. What the babies never saw in this initial scenario was an interaction between the hippo and the elephant. This is important because it allowed us to subsequently test whether babies nevertheless infer that the hippo should be more dominant than the elephant, given their shared interactions with the bear. Now, the way we tested whether babies made this inference was we then presented them with two new scenarios. In one scenario, the hippo dominated the elephant, as you might expect. In the other scenario, the elephant dominated the hippo, likely not what you'd expect. The prediction we made about how babies would respond to these scenarios was based on how people typically react to expected and unexpected events. When something expected happens, it's relatively boring. It doesn't elicit much of an interaction or a response. And if you're a baby, there isn't much staring. However, when something unexpected happens, that's much more interesting. It tends to re-engage attention. If you're an adult, it may elicit a surprise reaction. If you're a baby, this usually means a lot more staring. So now I'll show you a video of that same baby about to watch the unexpected event. And you'll notice that we flipped the positions of the hippo and the elephant just to make sure that babies were really attending and responding.
We lost the sound, I think, from the video at the moment. Can everyone still hear the sound in the session?
Can you still hear it?
I think we lost the sound, but we have subtext underneath. No audio, says Buzz and Paul. Thank you for sharing that. We're checking in the background for everyone.
So we can stop on that. It'll come back in a second when I reshare the screen. The subtitles are on. Apologies, we have formed a theory and tested it, and that is don't mess with the presenter's microphone settings whilst you're sharing a screen. If anyone else would like to join in with that experiment, please let me know. Let me know your results. So sorry, yeah, we were just trying to turn down my microphone settings, but I think it hijacked the system. Elise, thank you. Let's go back to presenter view. Let's go stop screen and then change it back to my slides. Is that one.
It was a very interesting video, Chris, where it was really testing the theories into practice. And even with an audience like babies, where we think, oh, they're pretty objective, not very subjective. They don't have a lot of context of the world like we do when we grow up. You still see it happening in practice there.
That's exactly right. And you're right, babies don't have a lot of experience. So what we tend to find is that the less experience that people have in a certain domain, the simpler the theories that they will develop are. So babies develop very simple theories. We're very, very social creatures. So the evidence that this presenter, Lucano, was presenting was based on social hierarchy. So we're very social. We develop theories of social hierarchy very, very early on. We know who is important in a social situation and who is subjugated in that social situation as well. But the thing to take note of on this is when that expectation, when that theory is broken, we find that very interesting. We are sponges for evidence. And we adopt and we integrate evidence, millions of data points every single day. And we constantly update these theories that we hold on how we engage with the world. And as soon as we come across a situation that breaks our expectation of a theory, we tend to find that very interesting. And we immediately start to come up with counter theories. And we'll talk through in a few slides' time how that relates to my research, and especially how that relates in at the bidding side of things. We're going to move on to the next slide. And I would like you all to become research participants for this slide. So Elise, if we can cut, actually there's no sound on this one, so we don't particularly need to cut. I just need to change my presentation view on this. So bear with me, I'm just gonna, thank you. I'm just gonna change what I present.
We all love technology, don't we? It keeps changing, it keeps developing, and definitely also in the world of presenting webinars, but also in bits, like Chris mentioned at the beginning. We see it even at Altura, where the development goes very, very quickly. So we have to adapt constantly, and we want to know and understand why something happens indeed, and to link it to the babies. Why it happens, and we don't understand or predicted this.
So the next piece that I'd like you to look at is called the Hydra and Simul animation. Some of you may have come across this already. And we're going to use it as an experiment for you to kind of look inside your own heads for a little moment. And I want you to start making a quick note as you watch this animation of what theories you're developing. So let's let the animation run, and then we'll come back to it on the slide. And I'd like you to make a note of what you're thinking. Pay attention to your own thoughts. It runs for about a minute.
Pop it in the chat so we can discuss it afterwards. Okay.
There we go.
Anyone had any interesting thoughts or theories during that video? Pop it in the chat. Okay, I see Paul mentioning children playing. Bob, opposites attract. Gonna show it here. So Paul, indeed, children are playing. Bob mentioning opposites attract.
Give people one more minute.
The big triangle was very aggressive. I fully agree with that, Fotis. And we do indeed interpret the figures as human beings. I had the same thought, but what would be then the round object?
So that, so let's switch back onto the slides. Perfect. So some of the theories that as I was putting this slide together, some of the theories that came into my mind are, first of all, do the shapes have intention? Do we give them behaviors or personalities? And a few people have said absolutely yes on that. What's the relationship between the two different triangles in the circle? A very simple theory, you know, is it just an unbroken rectangle, or do we think it's a door is a very common one for people to look at now. Do the shapes have mass? Do they have weight? Do they take a second to get up to speed? Do they move like something that we would expect to move with mass in gravity, or do they just move freely? The answer to all of those is no. They're just shapes on a piece of paper, but we attribute causality. We look for cause in a desperate search as human beings. We love it. Most people, I think, will have come across this animation through Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. It's referenced inside that, and it's an absolutely great example of how we develop theories and sometimes test them as well. One that I want to put to the chat, and there's a very particular answer I hope someone puts on this, is I want people to try and test their theory on this. Were those shapes originally different colors and presented in black and white? Or do you think they were drawn in black and white to begin with? Drop an answer in the chat.
That's a great question, actually. My first answer would be the colors I see on the screen.
So most importantly, let me give you the answer that I'm hoping that some people formed on that. Most importantly, our answer there is we don't know. We absolutely have no idea. There is a complete lack of evidence to show whether they would be originally colored and turned to black and white, or whether they were drawn in black and white. It's an incomplete theory. You can't complete that theory until you look for more evidence. And part of the way that you would test that is by using logical progression. So we have three main areas of logical thinking. Our first and not most common, but very regular, is inductive reasoning. This is where we would take individual elements. We would look for things happening, and we would create general rules to explain all of those things happening, such as my stakeholder turned in his draft copy late again. I don't think we're going to win this bid. That's taking a very specific instance, and it's creating a general rule through induction. It's a very bottom-up process. The next piece on that is deductive. That's taking the general rule and it's creating specific instances as a result. It's the opposite of inductive reasoning. This is, I know a general piece of information, so I can infer specific. This is, I have worked with this stakeholder many times before. They are always late when contributing their content. I can deduce that they will be late again in this. I can infer that they'll be late again in this. So we have inductive reasoning, which takes individual instances and applies them up to the broad. We have deductive reasoning, which allows us to take broad and apply them down to the individual. Both of those AI is very good at, like very good at. It can draw logical inferences really, really well. We've had mathematical rules for logical inference for decades now, almost since the first computing machines came about. The third aspect is called abductive reasoning. And that's quite uniquely human. We don't even see it very much in the animal world around us. It's quite uniquely human. It requires creativity, it requires novel theorization, and it requires us to really act as active theorists inside a process. Using abductive reasoning, we try and generate the best possible explanation in between observed events and rules that we already know through knowledge. So we will actively test our own theories. Were the colors black and white? Were the shapes black and white or were they colored? I don't know. To be able to say I don't know is a very human trait at that point. To be aware of your own limitations and the boundaries of your own knowledge is very human. And AI really struggles with that. We have to tell it what its boundaries are. If you were to ask AI to generate a potential list of theories to explain something, It could start all the way out at the next star and end all the way down at an atom. You really have to define its boundaries for us. As humans, we develop knowledge. We have quite an intuitive understanding of how the world around us works. And we intuitively apply those boundaries to almost every theory that we make and to every decision that we make as well. And that abductive reasoning is something that we do 1,000 times a day. And AI really struggles with that. We have to tell it what boundaries are in exactly the same way that you have to tell small children what the boundaries are when they make decisions for the first time as well. So that brings us to the research that we're currently carrying out at the University of Chester. We are very interested to know how this works inside a live bid process. So let's talk you through a theory framework to begin with. Over on the left-hand side, we have what's called a focal conjecture. This is the core theory. This is what everything else stems from. It's extremely simple. It can be distilled down into its constituent parts, but it explains everything that you need to explain at one particular time. And most importantly, this focal conjecture will change depending on the scenario and the argument that you're making. So in this instance, this is hypothetical, this isn't based on anything yet. In this instance, we're going to have a focal conjecture of we can win this bid profitably. And that's going to have certain key theories to it. I've listed 3, but there might be a dozen inside it. So to win a bid profitably, we might need to theorize that we're the cheapest in the market. We might actually not theorize we're the cheapest. We might theorize that we're not the cheapest, but that's okay because. We might theorize that we can beat the competition in quality at that point. We might theorize that because we've got a strong relationship with the buyer, we're in a unique position and we're preferential. So those are 3 example sub-theories. And you can see those sub-theories continue to split down. So to be the cheapest, we may have the lowest cost of delivery, we may have an extremely low internal margin. To be the strongest in quality, we might be able to evidence a very low failure rate, or we might be able to provide good case studies or give good warranty and assurances that we are the right person to buy from a quality perspective. Now, through this bid, a couple of different things might happen. And the impact that they have on our approach is very related to where they come inside that list. Because when we develop that list, we do it in a very specific way. We put the theories that we are most confident of up at the top, so they should be relatively untouchable. We put the theories that we are least confident of down the bottom, and those are the ones that should be shaky. They should be really open to counterfactual evidence, but they shouldn't necessarily damage our focal conjecture if they're shown to be incorrect. We should be able to update and adapt. But our ability to update and adapt reduces as we get higher up that list. Go for it, Lotta.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, when we're looking at the people in the chat, do they have a list like this? Have you ever thought about your strategic point, your theories and your theory lists in this matter and ordered them? Where is your company unique? If you have, pop them in the chat. It would be very interesting to learn where your focus is on. And maybe we can apply it to the second part of this session.
And that's exactly what it allows us to do, because ordering them in this way allows us to test ourselves, to test our theories, and to invite opinion. So you're exactly right, Lotta. Doing this on a day-to-day basis is a really useful tool, because not only do you gain a better understanding of why you're putting forward the theory you are, but you invite evidence against that theory. You invite people to try and come in and damage it or destroy it. So for instance, if we look at a counter scenario here, where the company puts up a mid-year price increase with their internal margins, they change the minimum margin that you're allowed to bid at. That's then going to damage your ability to win the deal profitably. You can either reduce your price, increase your price accordingly, and therefore be not the cheapest, or you might have to bid under your company's accepted margin thresholds. Neither of those are ideal outcomes. Because
And,
this is so high up our theory framework, that then becomes catastrophic to our focal conjecture, and in this instance would be switching to a no bid. We can't win in this instance.
and Chris, this is something you would do with every single bid over and over again, right? Because the rules change constantly for every tender you're working on. Doesn't matter if they're public or commercial.
That's exactly right. This is really useful in both tenders and in proposals as well. And you can do it from everything from the big theories. The good thing about this framework is that it lets you identify, really think about what your core argument is. And that becomes very close to a win theme at that point. Your focal conjecture, we'll look at this in a couple of slides' time. We'll compare focal conjectures and win themes. But your focal conjecture becomes very close to a win theme. We'll look at the difference in a minute. But then to explain it, you need to start listing out what it's based on. What is it dependent on? And you can start playing devil's advocate with yourself. You can start arguing against your own theory and looking for suitable alternatives. The other good thing about this as a theory framework is that you can do this not just for the win themes inside your bid, but also the operational pieces that you need to be able to pull your bid together. So for instance, one of them might be that we can respond in time with good quality. Responding in time is very difficult. It does require good technology platforms in place sometimes. So one of them might then suffer to say, no, we don't have good technology and we don't have a good knowledge base. We're not able to build our bid or our proposal in suitable time. And therefore, we need to abandon the idea that we can respond well in good time. Does that mean that we need to switch to a no bid strategy? Or does that mean that we need to update our focal conjecture and either ask for an extension or diminish our quality output as a result? So this really gives a good pathway towards strategy mapping and how you're going to run. But it's always based around this idea of developing what your theory of win is, and then testing and trying to damage that theory. We don't normally try to damage our own theories. This method really invites it. And some of the strongest bid managers out there are really able to separate ego from operation. And they're really able to invite people in to try and damage their win strategy. This is a great framework for doing that.
And that levels up the proposals and the bids as well, right? Because you keep developing in not only internal processes, but also the way you look at the proposals and the bids, and you challenge yourself in that, because we know the world keeps changing and the expectations change around bids as well, but also internally changes keep on developing. And I see also Michael mentioned a very interesting point there in the chat where he says win strategy needs to be linked to the prospect's priorities, hot buttons. You need to match indeed the award criteria, the needs, the requirements, and see if it links well to not only your company, but can you actually solve it? Don't say, here, this is what we do. And they have to figure that out, be very specific and be very clear in that.
But that's also a really testable theory, right? I mean, how many of you daily bang your heads against the desk when a salesperson tells you that matching hot buttons, sure, it's important, but it's not going to be what wins us this bid? It's a really testable theory. You have win-loss databases inside your organization. You have the ability to gather evidence to test whether hot buttons matter, whether they're critical to win, whether they're important to win, or whether they're just a nice to have. Now, almost everyone in this call has a gut feel that they are critical to win. How many of you have tested that?
Yeah, that's really into Bob's point there in the chat. It's a sales exec that has a feeling versus the hard evidence where you want to measure that data and actually see if it is true or not.
And that's exactly the framework that this type of active theorization gives you internally, is that you can start getting down to these sub-theories, these sub-theories, and you can go as many layers deep as you want. But ultimately, you're going to be able to look for evidence to disprove one of these. Now, we know that the way that we develop theories, and we saw this with the babies at the beginning, we don't come up with every theory to explain everything that might possibly happen to us. We start with a working theory, and unless we find evidence against that theory, that's the theory that we continue on with. We're very set in our ways as human beings. So we don't go out generally to gather evidence to support our theory. We tend to go out to gather evidence to reject our theory, and then we update our framework accordingly. And that's a really good segue into my next slide, because we think that's what happens. We don't know, we haven't tested that theory yet. So, as a very quick shout out to the work we're doing, if anyone on this call is currently bidding inside the UK, or actually if the company is resident inside the UK for GDPR rules, and would like to get involved with a study to find out if this is in fact how we do this on a daily basis as bid managers, please do drop me a note on the email address at my Chester account that you can see there, or scan the form. I'd love to have a conversation about how in 2026 we're going to work with a few companies across the market to really look at if this is in fact how bid managers and bid teams develop and test working theories of bid during the live process. Maybe it's not, maybe they do something else, and the good thing is we'll learn something out of that. So a couple of quick notes, because there is a risk similar to win themes, and especially similar to playing the so what game. There is a risk that you can just go down the theory rabbit hole forever on this. There is some good definitions on what a valuable theory is. This comes from a set of researchers in this field that are very active on novel theorization, Tepperfield and Ziegler. And they give theories that are valuable 4 key criteria. For a theory to be valuable, it needs to be new. It needs to be applied to the specific situation that you're looking at that time. That means stop reusing your win themes. Theories are not exactly win themes. We'll look at the difference in just a moment. But if all you've done is dug out generic win themes from a library and you've not adapted them to your situation, they're probably limited in how valuable. They do need to be simple and they need to be elegant. You really need to concentrate on either working up to that focal conjecture or defining your focal conjecture and then working down and putting your sub-theories in place. So they should be simple, they should be elegant. They should explain one thing and one thing only, and then they need to be combined to create that focal conjecture. Single most important thing, please, that anyone should take from today's session: your theories must be falsifiable. You must be able to seek and find evidence that would disprove your theory, and you must be able to show what that evidence is, and then you can evaluate whether you update your theory accordingly or whether you abandon it either in preference for another theory or whether it just becomes a counter strategy like no bidding at that point. If you cannot seek evidence to falsify, and ultimately if evidence cannot exist that falsifies your theory, it's no good to you at that point. It's just a belief at that point. It's worth nothing. And ideally, working alongside the novel point at the beginning, a good theory should also be generalizable, and it should allow you to generate new theories as well. So I did mention at the beginning that you shouldn't just lift from a database of theories, but you certainly should be able to use them for inspiration, and those theories should be able to develop and use other theories moving forward. So all of this is wonderful in theory, but what might some of these actually look like? These slides will be available afterwards. Apologies, the text is quite small on this one, but I've grouped some common theory areas together that people might want to start thinking about. So inside your bid, you might be developing theories or sub-theories around your customer, such as the customer's struggles are this. Why do you think this is what they need to achieve next year? Why are you developing the hot buttons that you are? What is your evidence base for those hot buttons? Is there evidence for or against that theory? Have you read the annual report? Have you spoken to the customer? Has the account manager engaged with them effectively? Or are you just relying on knowledge that might not be suitable in this instance to try and explain what a customer either wants or is doing? You may be developing theories about the competition, that your competition is particularly weak in an area or strong in an area. Again, are you going out and seeking evidence from your win-loss, from your market monitoring, from the news that might explain whether a competitor is particularly strong or weak in an area, and how does that impact your focal conjecture? Are you generating theories about your products and features? Are you assuming that something might be unique in the marketplace when in fact it's not? Are you looking for features and benefits? Are you tying that benefit to a customer need? True hot button theory at that point. The one that's at the bottom there is that for me, the theory of please give us a go, Mr. Customer, what's the worst that could happen? Not a particularly strong theory at that point. There's quite a lot of counter evidence and quite a lot of counter arguments against that theory. If that's the best that you've got moving forward for a bid, switch your strategy, use the framework we've quoted to show that it's not a workable theory, that it's not an area that the customer could buy.
And Chris, this is a very good, almost like a checklist to use with every single bit you're doing to make sense of where is the focus and how are we creating the strategy behind it.
It's a really good way of creating an argument. Your focal conjecture is your core argument, and then you're going to break that down 3, 4, or 5 sub-arguments, and then maybe a couple of sub-arguments to support that. And then you're just going to sit there for half an hour with a pen and just try and argue against yourself, or get someone else in your team in and say, does this argument hold up? Is it persuasive? Someone that you trust, if they don't believe it.
And this will definitely, I can imagine, also help with the writing part of the process and really upping your quality there.
It's clear,
and bringing
right?
it to a next level.
Absolutely that. You would be amazed. We all know that, for good paragraphs or for good pages, you should be starting with an introduction, an overview of your argument. You should be ending by summarizing that argument, and then in the middle, you should be making that argument. Some people are very good at writing those summary arguments, but then they tend to miss the explanatory bit in the middle. And a lot of the persuasion research out there shows that if you don't put that shared thinking in around the evidence, the support for your argument, it's almost impossible to get someone else to buy into your argument. And that ultimately is what we're trying to do as bid proposals and managers. We're trying to get the customer to get onto our side of the argument. We absolutely do have to keep an eye out for time. It's 48. We're finishing in around 10 minutes on this. And I've not even got to the second half. So I think you may have a follow-up presentation from Iloshi on decision-making inside the bid process, because we've really covered theorization here.
We'll share everything afterwards with everyone on the call as well. So if they miss certain parts, everything will be shared afterwards.
Absolutely. And as I say, if people will have me back, then I'd love to do a separate session on decision-making theory along the way as well. A very quick point, I've mentioned this a few times now, but how is the focal conjecture different from a win theme? They are very similar. They're very, very related. The main difference is that your win theme is, of a sort, completely customer-facing. So you may not use your win theme in its exact words to your customer, but it forms the basis of your argument to your customer at that point. It is why you should be chosen over other bidders in preference at that point. Your focal conjecture and your theory tree can also be used in your bid management process as well. So you can use it for internal arguments and conversations with stakeholders. You can use it to justify budgeting. You can use it to justify certain win themes and strategies along the way. And you can also use it to justify the operation, the bid management project that you're going to put in place to realize that bid. The bid itself is not just words on a page, it's the people and the thoughts and the ideas that come together to create that bid. And we develop theories very actively during that process, especially when we come across new situations, or unexpected situations. My designer is now off sick for 2 weeks and the bid comes in, what are we going to do to be able to support that? You need to generate your theory list as to how you can maintain a winnable bid, either without your designer or with an alternative designer. Whereas your win themes tend not to really cover that kind of internal operations side of things. They're much, much more customer focused. They embrace hot buttons. So you can test your win themes, you can test your hot buttons using this theory framework. However, the theory framework can also be used for those internal operations of the bid as well. We'll touch on very quickly some of the sources of evidence that you can use. As I mentioned, you can only disconfirm theories. We can never actually confirm them. All we can do is just keep looking for evidence against them. If we don't find evidence against our theories, then it just makes it a tiny little bit stronger every time. But a theory is never perfectly strong. All it takes is one piece of evidence to disprove a theory, even if you've seen it work a million times in the past. As soon as you learn that one piece of evidence that works against it, then it's disproven. You have to update or disregard it for that situation. So some of the general sources of evidence that we might see as bid managers would include your lessons learned debrief. It's a really good way, either internally or from the customer, of starting to generate and tie together data points to look at how a bid progresses. You've got, many of you will have competitive marketing teams. You really need to make sure they are looped in when you generate your win strategy. If you're not using your competitive marketing teams or competitive monitoring teams, then you're just not integrating external information into your bids. We can use internal informal information. And a really, really good way of doing that is finding people that used to work for your competitors. There's huge amounts of movement in most of your industries. And yet, from my experience, most companies don't make good use of employees who used to work for a competitor instead. They tend to rely on quite static bid and response teams, and they tend to have the same people involved all the time. But if you do know who a competitor is going to be, and you do have people inside your organization that used to work for that competitor, getting them involved in your win theme generation and your theorization at the beginning of the bid can be absolutely critical to helping you damage your own theories or avoid damaging your own theories. So there's many, many different places that we can look for evidence to try and refute or improve our own theories. So in summary, moving into our last couple of minutes, the key messages from me for this part are, first of all, use that focal conjecture theory map. Really understand what your key argument is, or alternatively, understand what your sub-theories are and generate your focal conjecture. But by the end of an early theory generation piece, you should have a good understanding of what your core argument, what your focal conjecture is inside this process. Actively seek to be proven wrong. You have to remove ego from process here, and you should actively seek evidence against your own argument. As you continue to fail to find that evidence, your argument grows stronger and stronger and stronger, but be ready to bin your argument at a moment's notice if the evidence points in the opposite direction. And I'm going to stop there, and we'll hopefully maybe use decision making in a future session.
Thank you for that, Chris. Might be good to also look quickly at the chat, because I saw there's a few messages that are very interesting maybe to hop on. I see Michael shared, can we share it here on screen? It's a bit longer of a message, but he actually argues that this kind of academic structure might not always be the best fit. You mentioned, of course, that you can also do it for internal focus points and not only for the end bit, but maybe you can respond to that, Chris.
Yeah, no, in essence, I completely agree with what Michael said on that. I don't advocate academic writing inside a bid at all. It is always a case of show, don't tell. And you should never treat your buyer as stupid. So that kind of heavily broken down point by point style writing where you would introduce by saying, the 3 reasons that we should be chosen are that we are cheaper, faster, and better. What we mean by cheaper is, bum, 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 bum. What we mean by faster is, bum, 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 bum. That's not interesting. That does not engage your reader, and actually completely the opposite. It's counterproductive because they'll stop reading. They won't get to the evidence that you're trying to provide them with. So I absolutely agree with you, Michael, that interesting prose is what allows you to present your evidence. My argument here instead is that actually explaining the reasons for your belief, explaining your argument so that the customer can get on board with your argument, so that they understand the detail and the minutiae, rather than you just presenting a top line summary, rather than you just saying, we are better than other people. It's not explanatory. It's not explanatory. It doesn't allow the customer to buy into your argument. But for you to be able to get them to understand why you're making that argument, you also need to understand yourself why you're making that argument. So I completely agree with Michael's point. You shouldn't do it like a primary school science lesson.
Perfect. And indeed, Marianne's point was an interesting one I want to bring up as well.
It absolutely is. It is absolutely critical to understand how important that weighting is to your customer. It's absolutely critical. And you remember we said there that you can't just dig out of a database of pre-existing theories. So your theory here would be to say our theory is that even though the bid is 60-40 weighted in terms of quality, our theory is that cheapest price is going to win. You can test that theory. If you've got a good account management team with strong relationships to the customer, you can just ask the question. We know that you're going to put 40% on price, but honestly, are you under budgetary constraints next year? Is this going to come down to a price win? If you have a good relationship, hopefully the customer will tell you. They'll provide evidence either in support or against that theory. So Marianne, I completely agree. And what you're talking about is testing that theory every time you make it at that point. But again, be clear on what the evidence that you would need to either be able to prove or disprove, or specifically disprove that theory would be, and look at it on a per situation basis and understand why that impacts your bid at that point. Why do you care what the price mix is to the customer? Do you care because it's going to impact your win theme and how you present your solution? Or actually, does it matter based on how you're going to gain support from your senior stakeholders at that point? Is your argument internally that we're going to need to dip under a profit window to be able to win this bid? Because you can say that internally, but you can't verbalize that necessarily to your customer at that point. So that active theorization per time is really important to understand the context in which your decision is being made. But I
yeah, absolutely
agree.
I see Marianne mentioning as well that during the bids, of course, with public ones, you're not allowed to contact the customer, but 100%. That is definitely something you can do afterwards when getting that feedback.
Sorry to jump in, Lotte, and sorry
please.
to disagree, Marianne, but almost every single tender process has a formal questions period at the beginning. So you absolutely are allowed to contact the customer, and you have to be very careful in the way that you phrase certain questions. And if you have a good account management process that has been engaged with the customer prior to the bid, then I absolutely agree with your point. You can ask questions prior to bidding that you would not be able to during the bid. But don't get caught up thinking that you're not allowed to contact the customer. You absolutely are. You just have to be very careful about what you ask and the way that you ask it, especially given that most of your answers are then going to be publicly communicated out to all bidders.
Thank you for that one, Chris. Very good point indeed, that during the Q&A phases, MVE stages, and I see Marianne popping it again in the chat, it does go indeed to all the competitors as well. So that is something to be indeed mindful of. I see the clock is ticking 12, so we're at the end of the webinar. I'm going to share our events pages from Altura's website because we have many more events coming up very soon, not only in the UK, but on the 12th of November. We also have a live event for all our Dutch people on the call that want to join, definitely come by, sign up. We have a very interesting things to share about the Altura platform and how it will look like in 2026. And thank you so much, Chris, for being here today with us, sharing all the theories and how to bring that to life into a bit, and really also argue against yourself and really reevaluate everything that you're doing on a day-to-day to get that new perspective going there as well.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone on the call. Thank you for joining us. Do let us know if there's any questions afterwards. We're happy to answer them. We will share, of course, the presentation and the recording with you afterwards. And yeah, do keep an eye on our events page for many more events to come. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.